Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kathy Livingston with Oliver's Nannies, and we are excited to welcome you today to a webinar on navigating COVID-19, a comprehensive approach to child wellness. Our goal here today is to talk with some local experts to really kind of review COVID-19 and how it relates to kids and child wellness from a very high level. So we know this is a really big topic and could be hours and hours and hours and hours of discussion, but today we kind of want to go over some high-level concerns and questions that we get asked at Oliver's Nannies and asked to really highly esteemed colleagues in the area, so we will do so. We ask that this be a safe zone. So we know that COVID-19 in and of itself, and especially when it relates to children, can be somewhat of an emotional hot topic, and everyone is entitled to their questions and what they feel is best for their children. So we ask you to keep open minds and ears as our experts speak, and you will have the opportunity to ask any questions at the end of any of the panelists. And no question is a bad question. So we are open to all questions and we welcome them. So we will probably be asking pre-selected questions until about, I would say, 12:45, and then at that point we'll open it up to everybody else. In the meantime, on your toolbar, you should see a place where you can type in a question. As they come to you, feel free to go ahead and type them in. And then at the time where we're kind of opening up, Sarah Mulcahyof, Executive Director here at Oliver's Nannies, will go through those questions to make sure they get answered. And if you want to rewatch this because it's so exciting, or you want to share it with friends and family, we will have a recording available. So that recording will be posted at oliversnannies.com on our Facebook, and I'm sure that some of our panelists too will also have that up for you as well. So let's welcome our panelists. We have DrLiz of Psychological and Educational Consulting. Her firm works with people of all ages. And we have Dr. Nick of Milburn Pediatrics, who I personally think is a local celebrity. He does see my daughter, so he is famous in our family. And myself and Sarah. So like I said, I am the owner and founder of Oliver's Nannies, and Sarah Mulcahyof is the executive director who runs the whole thing. And we are a local nanny agency. So with that being said, let's get started. So DrLiz, thank you so much for being here with us today. Unfortunately, DrLiz was having some technical difficulties, so we will hear her. We will not be able to see her pretty face today, but we appreciate her being on. And DrLiz, can you tell us a little bit about Psychological and Educational Consulting, your firm?
Yes, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for being so patient with me with all this technological stuff that I will never, ever get. But if I bring my 7-year-old in here, he'll get it really easily. I should have consulted with him. Yep. So my practice is located in Livingston, New Jersey. I always like to say I'm a mom of 3 first, and then I'm a clinical and school psychologist. I started the practice in my dining room once my 3rd son was born, and worked out of here for about 5 years. And then at that 5-year mark, I was getting ready to make a big decision whether to shut it down or do something different. And that's when I brought on a therapist who helped, took on a lot of my evening work, which left me available to my kids. And then it's been growing, thank the good Lord. And I now have 6 therapists working with me, as well as an office manager, an intern, and an extern. So it's a really, really cool adventure that I'm on. We do specialize in children, adolescents, and young adults with anxiety, ADHD, autism, learning disabilities, and behavior management needs. And we offer several services that I think make us a little bit unique in that we do provide the therapy, play therapy. I do psychoeducational testing. We also provide executive functioning coaching to our families. So we're kind of a one-stop shop.
That's awesome.
For a lot of families, which is nice.
And I'm glad it continued. Listen, we need it. So it's good that you were able to kind of expand your team and successfully balance mom life, which we all know can be difficult at times. So thank you for being here. Based on all that background, so we are hearing a lot, seeing a lot from our families on Facebook and the community that COVID-19 has kind of brought up some regressions with children. I know it's actually happened in my home a little bit as well with my 2.5-year-old. So regressions in various behaviors, whether it be sleep regressions, potty training regressions, even eating or academic regressions. Can you talk a little bit to how parents should be looking at those, handling what they're seeing? Are there some kind of high-level recommendations that you could make?
Of course. So I think for the younger children and preschoolers, this is really, really hard to understand and make sense of, that all the things that they were able to do at some point just kind of stopped, and their ability to understand that this is a pandemic, a global pandemic, that doesn't, they don't know what that means. So I think what parents I've been hearing from our families as well is that they're sad, and the predictability they once had is not there, and they don't know what to do about it. And so they're kind of trying to fight it and find that normalcy they once had. And so, yeah, we're going to see kids who are regressing in their eating and their sleeping. You know, if they were able to eat independently, now they need to be fed. If they were sleeping independently, now they need to come and, you know, find you again. Or if they were independent in their potty training, now they can't. And I think a lot of parents look at that, and I think they understand, because everyone is really stressed about all of this and how much our life has changed, and changed very quickly, right? We all went from being out and about to now we're all home all the time. I love my children dearly, but this is too much together time. Nonetheless, that's a topic for another day.
Fair. Yes, I get it. I get it. I'm right there with you.
Thank you. Thank you. And this is when the wine glass comes out, but not right now, especially because you guys can't see me. So I could be drinking, but you guys would never know.
You don't know what's on my desk, Dr. Liz. You don't know.
Right? Yeah. And you know what? I might come over and sit 6 feet away from you and clink from a distance. I don't know.
That's fun.
I'll bring the Merlot or the Malbec or whatever. But I think that this is a time that when we see our children getting aggressive or anxious or being super restless or getting really lethargic, I think it's important for us to see this not as you're being difficult or you're making my life difficult or you're piquing my anxiety and I need to make this behavior stop. Is to really look at it with a great deal of sympathy, and to not want to go that like punishment or consequence route. Like if your child is now wetting his or her pants again, let it be. It's okay. They don't want to be in their diapers or their pull-ups forever. So it's okay. Let them have their time. It will eventually correct itself if it hasn't already for a lot of families.
Sure.
And so really avoid going down that route. If they're asking for a diaper or a pull-up, go with it. Don't be punitive. Okay. And when your child is feeling more comfortable, he or she will move forward again and ask for the underpants, or to be able, you know, I want to sleep in my bed, because these are natural milestones that our children want to accomplish. So if you look at it that way, it will likely give parents more patience. Just even going up the age ladder a little bit, you know, we've seen a lot of kids who are now, you know, like, whereas before they could play independentely or for a period of time by themselves and enjoyed it, now they want to be right there next to mom or dad, and mom and dad are like, but we need to work. Or now they want to stay. Like I have a 14-year-old, and I'd like to see him every once in a while. Like he's hiding in his room and he's up all night because he's trying to create that distance away from us. I'm laughing. You guys can't see that, but I'm laughing because I think he's trying to get away from us. And the best way to do it is to sleep all day and be awake all night while we're sleeping. So all different ages. Yeah, and I think, you know, I think as parents to just kind of be open, like to this idea that nothing about the time that we're in right now is usual. Nothing about it is familiar. We have never done this before. And so it's okay if you're a little bit more flexible as a parent, where you're, you know, as much as I would love to see my kid for breakfast or lunch, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, because this is the way he's coping.
And that's how he's getting through it. So you have a point where you recommend, and I'm going off slide here, so I'm sorry, but
no, it's okay.
This is somebody should reach out for professional help? Is there something where you say that, okay, this is a sign that it might be being larger than waiting it out? They might need a little extra help professionally. Is there something that you would say is a sign parents could look out for?
So I think this is double-sided, because we as parents are having a lot of anxiety, right? We can't predict through this pandemic. We can't predict what's going to open, what's going to close, what September is going to look like. So our anxiety is peaking. So if we feel like our anxiety is peaking in response to our children's anxiety peaking, and now we can't be the ones to comfort our children, that's a good time to seek someone else's help. For young children, having play therapy to play out their fears, to play out their wishes, to play out whatever emotions they're struggling with is a good idea. We've been getting calls, thankfully, for, my child is anxious, my child is upset about this, and I can't give my child an end date, right? And so just talking through that and learning to become comfortable with the discomfort of all of this is really what our goal as therapists is for our parents, just comforting our parents and trying to find new norms, right? So for a lot of our children, our younger children, our elementary age children, trying as much as possible to maintain some sort of routine Monday through Friday, and then a separate routine for the weekend, right?
Okay.
So that kind of a strategy for a child who is anxious or really needs to hold on to something familiar and consistent. So going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, having meal times at around the same times, getting up in the morning and getting changed, which sounds simple, but it makes a big difference when you're not in your pajamas all day. And that's one thing that my 7-year-old loves his pajamas. So to him, this was like awesome. For me, I needed to get up every morning and put on a full face of makeup, put on my jewelry, put on my clothes, because I needed to feel like I was going to the, a separate room in my house. My commute was very long. And so, I needed that.
Yeah.
Right. I needed that for me. And when I find on the days where, let's say, like on a weekend where I am in my pajamas all day, that's when I actually feel the worst. And so I stopped doing that for me. And we offer these suggestions to our families when you have children who are showing the distress. Like if a child is anxious and is now starting to develop maybe some OCD type rituals or things like need to touch certain things in a certain order before they leave a room. We've seen an increase in that. Or, needing to line up things for just, I can eat my own daughter. I have an 11-year-old and she's very anxious. And for her, what has kept her sanity and kept her anxiety at a lower space is that she does get up every morning she does this on her own. She wakes herself up, she makes her bed, she gets changed, she makes herself breakfast, and she does this every day because she needs that structure to start the day. Then she likes to have her flexible time later in the afternoon, but she needs to wake up and do that in that order. So having an order, like if you don't, I'm not a good time watcher, self-proclaimed here. So I know for me, like I'm not going to do well by 10 a.m. or 10:05, we're going to do this. Now at 10:17, we're not doing that, but we're going to do it in a certain sequence. For some parents are awesome time watchers. Yeah, so maybe just going in an order. Like first we're gonna have breakfast, and then we're gonna read, and then I'm gonna give you an hour of screen time, and then it's lunchtime, and then we're gonna, if you can adhere to that type of thing.
And having a schedule. So I heard a couple things there too, was the playtime, the routine, going to bed at a consistent time as part of that routine. Is there stuff for the socialization varying by child age that you think is important for, we have families now that everybody's going out and they're seeing each other now, but then we also have families on the other end of the spectrum where they're still really pretty sheltered in place. Is there something specifically for those families to kind of, these are great tips and suggestions to add to allow for that socialization?
I think, I've seen both extremes personally and professionally. I think for parents and for families who really don't want to come in contact with other people right now, which is, it's all based on preference and comfort level. So there is no right or wrong. And I really say that on a very regular basis. There is no right or wrong here. It's whatever you're comfortable with. But it's social interaction is really important. So if you can find a way to do that, whether it's through FaceTime, whether it's through standing across the street from each other, taking a bike ride across, it really is based on comfort level in that respect. But or like being able to see grandma and grandpa and setting ground rules beforehand, you know, in terms of masks or distance, or sitting on the front lawn six feet apart with beach chairs and trying to keep it very fun. Just because I'm personally someone who needs social interaction to survive. So initially this was painful. This was incredibly painful for me. And I could see that I was starting to just, like, my oomph and my energy level was just horrible. So once I allowed myself, you know, with comfort to come in contact with other people, I could see that I felt better. I felt energized and so forth. So it's really depending on your child's need, social need, the level, the amount, in addition to your comfort level. So like in my house, I have my daughter who she will see her friend and then she needs 2 days to recuperate from that social interaction. And then I have, so yeah, right? So and I'm the opposite. Me and my 7-year-old are just like, who are we playing with next? Who's next? Who's coming next? You know?
Oh, I went to Target and made eye contact inappropriately with every single person. Like, can I talk to you? Can I talk to you? Can we talk about something? Anything? What did you get? Did you find paper towels? You didn't? You did? So we all need it. What about, and I know I got to watch the clock here too, but one question with socialization is, so I have a 7-month-old, for example, and a lot of families out there have younger children that kind of around the time that COVID hit, those children would have really started experiencing their first play times and play dates. What do you feel the impact is overall to children that young, if any, or if anything should even be, you know, if that should even be of concern and any special attention paid to it?
So you're talking about like under 1?
Yeah, under 1.
Under 1, I would say if you can bring siblings together and that you're able to play as a parent with your child, I don't think the damage is going to be immense. I really don't. I think we bring you know, infants together so that they can see other people but are they really sharing? They're kind of still doing their thing. The other child is doing their own thing. They see each other, they may acknowledge each other, they may swat at each other. But truthfully, I don't think there's going to be an incredible amount of loss of skill as long as they continue to interact. I think for infants, trying to interact via camera is hard because it doesn't really make sense. And again, if 2 parents are willing to sit outside far apart with their children and some toys, you know, you keep your toys, I keep my toys, and they're with each other, I think that will do. I don't feel like children at that age will suffer any strong loss. And then as soon as we're able to, again, at some point, then you can schedule those play times again. But I think if they're interacting with siblings, if they're interacting with parents, you can still develop those skills because, you know, when 2 babies come together, they're there, they feel each other's presence, they realize it's another person. But I don't genuinely feel that there's going to be a loss there.
It's more independent play at that point. So
it really is.
Well, I appreciate you being on. We do have to move on to Dr. Nick for time. We should have made this a very long presentation, in my opinion. So maybe we can revisit some things. I greatly appreciate it. And if you could hang tight and stay with us, as we might have some questions at the end, that would be lovely.
Of course, I'll be here.
Thank you. All right, Dr. Nick, you're up.
All right. Hello.
You're a very important guy in our family, so I expect some good stuff out of you. Dr. Nick, with Milburn Pediatrics. Yeah, do you want to tell us a little bit about Milburn Pediatrics as a practice? I know it's been around for a long time in the area.
Yeah, a long time. I actually don't know how long. Much longer than me. But it's yeah. So we're a privately owned, small to mid-sized primary care pediatric practice in Milburn. It's 5 physicians. We see kids from birth up until you turn 22 years old here in the office for well visits and sick visits and immunizations and sports forms and all that good stuff. So yeah, that's about it.
And we love them. And we've seen all the doctors and they're great. Well, I don't know if you know this, Dr. Nick, but COVID and relating to kids, people are like, they can't get it, they can't get it, they can get it, they can't get it, they can get it, but they can't get it. And then they have this reaction and they have that reaction and everybody has a thing. And there's like 9,000 articles on Facebook, even more blogs and news articles. So what's the deal? So from your medical perspective, how is COVID-19 a risk to children?
All right, great question.
No pressure.
No pressure. So I will preface what I'm about to say with a caveat, which is that anybody can get COVID, anybody can be in the hospital with COVID, anybody can die from COVID. There's nobody who is like absolutely safe from this. That being said, all the evidence we have, and the other caveat I'll throw in here is this is still only a virus that's been around for 6-7 months. We are continually learning new information about it. And so our knowledge is constantly subject to change here. So I can only speak based on available evidence that we have at the moment. All that being said, everything we have so far seems to show that kids are at significantly lower risk from COVID than adults. So some stats that I just pulled up. So in the United States, 1.5% of all cases are in kids 0 to 4 years old. 5.4% of cases are in kids 5 to 17 years old. So much lower. I mean, much lower numbers than you would expect based on population. So as far as like severity of illness, the overwhelming majority of kids who do have this virus are going to have either no symptoms or mild symptoms. I don't know. I can't find how many are asymptomatic. We're probably not able to determine that. But of people who were symptomatic, the most common symptoms are general viral symptoms: fever, cough, malaise, muscle aches, headaches, stomach symptoms. That's what's something that makes this actually a really difficult virus. Is it just looks like so many other
regular. Yeah. Yes.
It looks like the flu. It looks like a cold. It looks like a stomach bug. And so it's really tough to say, oh yeah, this looks like COVID or this doesn't look like COVID. But for kids, they tend to be very mild. So I was just, again, looking at some numbers. As of July 16th, what I was able to find in the United States, they had through the CDC, they had 43 states reporting, and New York City, there were 66 pediatric deaths. And that represented 0.03% of all pediatric cases.
Which any death is bad, but that's such a low number.
So, when kids do die of COVID, which is obviously awful, it's in the news. And the reason it's in the news, I think, is one, because it's children, and two, because it's so rare.
Ordinary.
It's so out of the ordinary that it does make the news when it happens. And so it can be, I think, very, frightening to see these stories of kids who are healthy and end up with COVID and they're in the hospital and they can, be very sick. But the reason it's in the news is because it's so news, I think.
Out of those statistics, Dr. Nick, is it that those children had pre-existing conditions, or is it just luck of the draw and there's not really a pattern? Or
so there's not a ton known about this in kids. In adults, there's along with increased age, there are a lot of medical conditions that seem to predispose you to more severe disease. In kids, that looks like it's kind of the case. Obesity
Okay.
seems to be a pretty big risk factor in kids
Okay.
for more severe disease, and kids who are what we call medically complex. So kids with genetic or metabolic disorders, kids who have cerebral palsy and are on a
Okay.
ventilator, things like that.
And
Those
increases.
kids
Okay.
do seem to be at higher risk for severe disease. But again, like I said at the beginning, anybody can get this. Anybody can get very
Mhm.
sick. So just because it's a healthy child, there's still some amount of risk there, but quite low from what.
Much lower.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then I don't want to compare it to flu too much because that was a big issue earlier. But really, for children at least, this does seem to be basically in the range that we see for typical seasonal flu.
For the children. Yep.
In the 2019 flu season, there were 130 pediatric deaths in the United States.
Okay.
The flu mortality rate, in pediatrics is 0.15%.
Okay.
And so that's kind of in line with the numbers that we've been seeing with COVID for children. Again,
Okay.
I want to
So
stress
then
for
it's-
adults, this is very different.
Yeah.
For adults, this is absolutely not the flu. For kids, the risks as far as mortality seems to be equivalent.
So it sounds like you can get it, and they can get it. I was going to say, so it sounds like they can get it,
Yes.
but even if your child does necessarily come down with it, it's not in and of itself a reason to panic.
Correct.
The outcome is more likely than not that it's going to run its course.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm actually much more concerned about everybody around the child who has COVID than the child himself or herself. Yeah. So yeah, and then one last note. Sorry, I do need to throw in a word about the multi-system inflammatory.
Yes, I do. That yes.
Children. So this month or two ago was getting a lot of attention in the news. Does not seem to be getting as much attention right now, but it's still there. This is a very serious but very rare, it seems, complication of COVID in children that seems to typically happen, although we're not really sure about this yet, typically a few weeks after they actually have the virus, which may be asymptomatic or symptomatic at the time of the acute.
Okay, the COVID itself might be asymptomatic. You wouldn't have even known that they had it. Okay.
Exactly. But then, about several weeks later, they get persistent fever, stomach pain, diarrhea, rash, conjunctivitis, symptoms like that, resembling Kawasaki's disease. And then that can progress to shock and heart problems. So this is a very serious illness that needs to, those kids need to be in the hospital, often in intensive care. So very dangerous, but we seem to have medications now that are pretty good at treating it, which is great. And again, it's a rare complication. In one study in New York City, they found an incidence of 322 kids out of 100,000 who had SARS-CoV-2, tested positive for the virus, and an incidence of only 2 kids out of 100,000 who had MIS-C. So much rarer than the virus itself.
Now, if you're a parent like me, though, you see that news clip of, I think it was a little boy in Queens that had to be rushed to the hospital. He was in bed with his mom and all of a sudden just couldn't breathe. And then I was like, I can never leave watching my children again. How am I ever going to live? I have to be eyes on them at all times. It sounds like, though, what you're saying is, hopefully it's not like an immediate, this comes on right away, that if there's a fever, there's things that you could look out for to make sure that, hey, maybe something's going wrong here, let me call, hopefully.
Absolutely. So the MIS-C is not something that happens right away. The persistent fever is part of it. So you don't go from being totally healthy to being in the ICU with this in 24 hours. It's a much longer process.
Much longer progression, so to keep an eye on it.
But absolutely, if you are, for parents out there listening, if you do see, you think your child has symptoms that may match this, absolutely call your pediatrician and have them take a look. Okay?
And then that leads to the next question, which is obviously, so we know masks and the typical recommendations. From a pediatric perspective, it sounds like, you know, I don't want to say the risk is lower, but maybe the risk, that's a nice way to put it, is the risk is, or the probability is better of having a good outcome. What are the risks or the safety measures that Millburn Pediatrics is kind of recommending to parents that they implement with their children, and at what ages and things like that?
Really tough.
Yeah.
So I'm going to echo what DrLiz said earlier here, which is that this is really up to individual families. It is up to, you know, individual circumstances with the family members, with the child himself or herself, your level of risk tolerance, many factors playing into this. To start with the simple, and again, I'll again echo her, there are no right or wrong answers here. The basic stuff, children 2 and up should be wearing a mask when they're in public spaces, outdoors or indoors. 2, frequent hand washing or use of hand sanitizer. 3, any kind of shared objects should be wiped down and disinfected regularly. You want to minimize the amount of shared objects, you know, touched objects in the first place now. And, you know, obviously social distancing with people. Now, as far as like, can they see their grandparents? Those are tough. Again, I'm more concerned for the grandparent than I am for the child in those situations. And so it's going to require a conversation based on, you know, the parents and the grandparents and whoever else.
Their risks.
Yeah. Try and figure out how that's going to get done. I wanted to say something else there. So as far as like what's lowest risk, and then going from there, if you do decide that you want to have some kind of interaction with a friend or grandparent or something like that, the lowest risk situation is going to be a socially distanced outdoor gathering where everybody is wearing masks.
Okay. Still with masks.
That's going to be lowest risk. Anything you take away from that increases risk of transmission. So if you don't wear masks, that's going to be higher risk. If you do it indoors instead of outdoors, that's higher risk. If you are within 6 feet of each other, even if you are wearing masks, that's higher risk.
Increases.
And so again, not that any of that's right or wrong, I just think it's important for people to understand that there are levels of safety here and levels of risk, and you need to just decide for yourselves where you're comfortable. For example, if you have a child who, you know, has cystic fibrosis or something, you probably are going to want to be more careful with that child than you might be with somebody who doesn't. And so that's going to factor into what you're going to allow, what you might not allow.
Okay.
So, but yeah, that's and get them vaccinated. Get their routine vaccinations. This is not a reason to skip vaccines. And I'm really encouraging everybody to get flu vaccines this year. That's going to be super important.
And we fully obviously support whatever a parent feels is best for their children, but value vaccinations and everything that comes with them. And I do want to note in disclaimer, because this is being recorded for Millburn Pediatrics, that all of this information is as of July 27th, 2020. So if something is found out after today, certainly whatever you've said today is relevant to what is known today. We appreciate all of that. Information has been super helpful, and I have some other questions for you. So if we have time at the end, I'm going to be selfishly asking them. And if you could hang tight. So, Sarah now, Mulcahyof is Executive Director of Oliver's Nannies. So I'm going to hand it over to her to talk about what we do here.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Kathy, and thank you everybody for joining. As Kathy said, I'm Sarah Mulcahyof. I am the Executive Director here at Oliver's Nannies. We started in 2018. We are a locally owned, locally run business. A little bit about us. We provide in-home nanny services We provide care long-term, short-term, even pre-COVID, if your child was homesick from school, we could get you a nanny at that point in time, and continue to do so. I know we're going to touch on that a little bit. And in terms of what we do, in addition to placing nannies in home, we stay involved. So what does that look like for you and for your family? We're onboarding the nannies and employing the nannies. So we also provide care plans to make sure that, expectations are set, that care is managed, scheduling, all of that is all taken care of through our agency here. With all of that being said, Kathy, I have a few questions for you from Oliver's Nannies here.
Sure.
So when it comes to childcare, talk about safety a little bit, and specifically in regards to COVID-19 and how you've seen it, implemented throughout maintaining care.
Sure. So obviously child safety in a nanny agency is always kind of top of mind, and increased even more so, and with a different lens when COVID-19 hit, so to speak, in March. We had some families that just needed to continue care. I mean, the bottom line was they needed to work, they needed the care. I happen to be one of those families. So it was really sitting down and saying, how do we manage an outside person coming into the home during what is a shelter in place? So what we really looked at is kind of what Dr. Nick alluded to, is we need to wipe down surfaces. How often do we wipe them down? What surfaces are getting wiped down? Having protocol. So in a lot of homes, not just mine, but some of the others that continued care throughout, the nanny would bring a set of clean clothing. So when they arrived at the home, there would be a safe place. For us, it was in our basement bathroom. She would go down, fully changed. I know many families implemented this as well. She left shoes at our home. She'd leave extra clothes at our home. So whatever she was traveling to us in was fully changed. She washed her hands before she would go upstairs and touch anything in the household or play with the kids. So kind of that like rechanging of a uniform, if you will, while in the home, and then just repeated hand washing throughout the day. We've had other families implement mask wearing. So depending on the times of day, what the activities are, we do have some nannies that are continuing to wear masks. In addition to other protocol, we've had some families request testing prior to beginning, and we've had some families that are now discussing ongoing testing. Obviously, that has to be discussed with the nanny. And what our goal is to say is, in each situation, what is a good match with nanny to family? So how is the nanny seeing, experiencing, and acting during COVID-19? And are we matching that up with family? Because whatever the risk the family chooses to do exposes the nanny. And whatever the risk the nanny chooses to do on her own time or his own time exposes the family. So really having those conversations to make sure everybody's on the same page and meeting what the other person would like them to, and then rehabbing them. Because I think how everybody saw COVID in March might have changed in April, changed in May, changed in June as we opened up, so to speak. So making sure that the nanny and the family still have that protocol in place to whatever degree helps both parties feel comfortable, and then still has that conversation ongoing about what are you doing when you're not here? Both the family and the nanny, to make sure that everybody's comfortable with the risk that's taken.
Awesome. On the workforce side, what are you seeing in terms of the nannies? Are you having, nannies still applying, still looking for work? Can you speak about the nanny side of that?
I sure can. I like how you ask me these questions like you don't do this every day with me. So Sarah knows. So with the workforce side, it's been interesting. Unemployment, as we all know, is high. So we expected a lot more applications coming in, but I think people are still trepidatious about taking the work in home. So we're seeing a few things. And I guess the bottom line is the pool of nannies has somewhat shrunk, because most families that are starting care, having care, talking about starting care, are wanting nannies that drive, not because they're planning to take kids out, but they don't want somebody commuting to them. So they feel that's an increased risk. So almost unfortunately, a lot of really great nannies that are not able to drive are not really relevant candidates for a lot of the families that we're seeing. So it shrinks the pool quite a bit there. Then you have nannies that for whatever reason, they're not prepared to come back to work because they have a high risk person at home. They're high risk themselves. Let's say they have diabetes or so forth and so on. And they're worried about COVID being brought into their own home. So that knocks a bunch of people out. And then you have people that are living with somebody else that might be in an occupation that's considered very risky. For example, openly, we had to have a discussion as a family that our nanny lives with her 2 daughters that are both nurses at a dialysis center, and had to say, okay, you know, what's the risk here? And the bottom line was we needed her. So the risk of my sanity is what ended up being the most important factor there. And so she came and we said, you know, here's how we monitor symptoms. We did have a couple COVID tests along the way. So we're really seeing the workforce shrink. And the reason that's important is because it's still possible to find really great people, but the lead time, we used to be able to find somebody potentially in as little as 24 hours or same day. It take weeks now, depending on how many other factors are present for the person that's looking. So that's important for everyone to keep in mind as they pursue childcare, that it might take a little bit longer right now.
Great, yeah. And just to echo off of what Kathy was going to say, in terms of, you know, the lead time, you know, we want to make sure that all of these extra steps are being completed to make sure all of the safety precautions that Kathy was mentioning are all being able to be implemented as well. Are there any other concerns that you're seeing, you know, amongst families that you would be helpful to share with the community?
So we've seen one that comes up with a few of our families, and including mine, which was, what did your nanny or sitting services look like prior to COVID, and what does it look like now? And really what that came down to is a little bit of what DrLiz was speaking to, is what are things that are almost necessary now to fill a gap of something else that was there to begin with. So for example, our nanny used to care for our 7-month-old and then clean when she had time during nap time. Well, now our 2.5-year-old is not going to school anywhere. So instead of cleaning, she's spending that time doing more academic items with him, which for us would be the alphabet and shapes and colors and singing. So our focus is for her to really fill that gap of things that he was learning while he was not at home. We've had other families that really want to make sure to incorporate exercise, playtime outside, craft time. So it's a really good opportunity to sit down and say, okay, let me look at what my wants were before COVID. And some of those might have turned into needs now. And going back into that schedule and structure, if you've had a lot of our children that we service also, you know, are in swim or karate, school, all of the above, and have all these extracurricular activities, what we did with them at home was very different than what we would be doing with them at home now. So how do we fill those needs for exercise and engagement and learning, and kind of really revisiting those care plans to make sure that we're crossing as many I's and dotting, crossing as many T's and dotting as many I's. You don't want to do the reverse as possible to ensure that we are providing as much normalcy and learning and comfort and empathy, as DrLiz said, to all of the families that we possibly can.
Right. It's just about setting those expectations, you know, with the family and the nanny to make sure that, you know, everything is being maintained as much as possible throughout, you know. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kathy, for answering some questions.
Sure.
We do have a few questions from the audience here. Kathy, I know you had a few questions as well, but I would like to get started with a question for Dr. Nick. If a child has asthma, intermittent or any type of form of asthma, well controlled, are they still at a higher risk for a more serious illness if they contract COVID? Oh, Dr. Nick.
Oh, you're muted.
Oh, there we go. 1 second.
Oh, he's still muted.
I did. There we go.
There we go.
Yeah. So great question. Yeah. You know, while I don't think we have a definitive answer to that yet, and so certainly could change. It does not seem that well-controlled asthma is a risk factor in kids for severe COVID disease, which is great news, obviously, because a lot of kids have it.
Right. Great. Let's see here. DrLiz,
Yes.
as schools are starting to, announce and introduce their plans for the fall, I know some schools still haven't, fully introduced their plans. Some have a virtual component. What are some tips for long-term academic success through virtual learning that you might be able to provide?
I'm sorry, repeat your question one more time. I don't think I fully understood what you're asking.
So as plans for schooling are being announced, there seems to be, a continued large component of virtual learning. What are some tips that you have for long-term academic success through virtual learning for children in elementary and middle school?
So as a mom of 3, this is a tough one for me because I'm not sure what I'm doing, right? But I know in theory what we should be doing, and what I hope to do if I don't lose my sanity is to, again, have as much of a routine as possible. And like right now during the summer, I'm trying to keep my kids reading their summer reading. My 7-year-old, he's continuing to read, do some math stuff, all computer-based so that it still feels fun. Because I'm personally, as a mom, I'm very worried that they lost so much academic instruction. My 7-year-old was already behind in the area of reading and math. And so for me, that's a huge source of my own personal anxieties. My child was already falling behind. Throw a pandemic in, and I was like, okay, fine. If we can get through the pandemic, September will be okay because we're going to go back as usual. Well, that's not happening. So I know that a lot of parents out there are feeling it the same way as I am of what can I be doing through the summer to keep building the kids' skills. And the best thing you can really do is, for whatever that area that needs the skills to be developed. For me personally, I hired a tutor. Tutor comes and sits outside with my child. And, for a lot of parents who come the fall, when there's still going to be a big virtual learning component, I strongly support finding someone through your agency to come in to take care of the kids and to be that teacher, for lack of a better way of looking at it. That one person that creates a routine, who is not mom or dad, who is not trying to juggle the conference and here, let's finish your math worksheet. And by the way, I have no clue what this is. I know how to regroup the way I know how to regroup, and you will be fine if you regroup the same way also. Yeah, those are some of my sore points there. Like, can we just add without all this, I don't know what? So I think the question is, it's a big one. I think there's a lot of uncertainty. I don't know that any plan that we're thinking about now it may or may not go into effect in September. And if you're a working parent and you're going to continue working, God willing, my personal perspective is bring someone else in to help you, as long as you're comfortable with that. And who better than Oliver's Nannies?
Well, thank you.
Actually,
jumping off of that, Kathy, can you speak on, are there nannies willing to do that e-learning, virtual learning component of a day?
So definitely there's some that are, and there's some that are not. So I think it kind of goes back to, and we were talking about this before the audience got on, that we're meeting with a few families at the beginning of this week, that as school plans are announced in areas local to us, parents are calling in saying, hey, I got to work, like I can't do this and I can't juggle it. Somebody's else going to have to help with this. So we are able to help with that, and we are able to find nannies. It is one other component that we would end up vetting for. So some of our nannies are fantastic baby nurses, for example. They probably would not be suited for doing something like this. So it really comes down to making sure we have that time in advance to put towards saying, like, okay, what are the grade levels that we want this person to be familiar with? Obviously, e-learning being new to all of us, it's something that would be new to a nanny as well, but we'd want to make sure that we matched up a nanny that was familiar with the age group, might have kids of their own, understand the academic part of it and the homework help. certainly would be experience that would be appropriate that we could look for. Just again, making sure we have that time up front, considering all of the other factors that are relevant at the moment.
Great.
And if
Thank
I
you.
could jump in too, like, you know, we as parents, we're not teachers, right?
Sure.
We're not teachers. So I think in the fall, even if a nanny is not necessarily a teacher, if she can just take, she or he can take the role of mom or dad
Mm-hmm.
and provide that, like someone who is dedicated to just that, as opposed to, let me give you an hour here, let me give you 15 minutes here, and to be able to sit and just provide that consistency again, and the time dedication, I think, is huge. So even if you don't have a certified teacher coming in, I think that's okay too, because we're, as parents, we're not certified teachers.
Absolutely. I think a lot of what this comes down to right now is all of us being able to be our best selves. Like I am, and despite what Sarah will say, not one of the most patient people in the world. So I think I'm a great mom, but I also need my time to work. And if you're trying to juggle too many things at one time, you're not going to be your best self in any avenue. So I think it is really looking for those supports as safely as possible. I know that it has been necessary for me.
And I think also as parents, recognizing that we have taken on so many roles. And again, I speak from my own personal experience and listening to other moms personally and professionally. We're exhausted. We are tired. There's a lot that we're handling. We're our children's playmates, we're their teachers, we're, you know, we're running businesses, or we're employees. We're trying to build this nice time that, you know, okay, so looking at the silver lining, we do have time with our children. Our life has definitely been reset, and I appreciate all of that because I think we all needed it. But at the same time, we've taken on so many other roles, and we're together a lot. And I say that facetiously and not so facetiously. We're together a lot, and we're not used to being together all that much time. Like, we all went to different places, and you went and saw different people and came home, and you appreciated your home. Now we're home a lot. I can't wait to get the heck out of my home on certain days, right? And the same with the kids. It's like, come on, we got to get out of here. I don't know where we're going, but I don't care if we roam the streets. Let's just get out.
And then you add in all the households like me that added another COVID dog, and it's just mayhem. I mean, listen, we're all losing it a little bit.
Cat. I got a COVID cat.
You're not the only any animal. Well, it looks like we are coming to almost 1 o'clock here. So I really, really appreciate Dr. Liz, Dr. Nick, you both being on. You've been awesome. If we have other questions, we'll make sure that we get them answered. Like we said, there'll be a recording available on oliversnannies.com probably as early as tomorrow, and we'll provide that to Milburn Pediatrics and to Psychological and Educational Consulting. And we appreciate everybody's time, and good luck through COVID-19.
Thank you so much. Be well, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Bye.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.